On a fence line at the edge of the Brazilian Cerrado, a creature that looks like a fox walking on stilts has been fighting for its life for 3 weeks. It is one of the rarest canids on Earth, and it is almost dead. The only thing standing between it and a quiet disappearance is a farmer who has never heard of it, and a dog who simply followed its nose. The dry season arrives in the Cerrado with the particular cruelty of slow erasure. August pulls moisture from the soil and color from the grass until the savanna turns pale gold and the air carries the mineral smell of earth that has been parched for months. Across this vast interior plateau, farmland and wilderness are divided not by rivers or ridge lines, but by wire thousands of kilometers of fencing. Some of it decades old, rusted and half collapsed, its original purpose long forgotten by anyone still living. It was one of these fences that caught the animal. Daniel Souza had farmed the same stretch of Cerrado for 31 years. 54 years old, broad-shouldered with the cracked hands of a man who had worked dry soil all his adult life. He knew his land precisely, which sections flooded first, which fence lines needed inspection every 2 months, and which could wait. Over 3 decades, he had also learned that the sounds his dog made were at least as reliable as anything his own senses could offer. The dog's name was Cafe, a medium-sized mixed breed with brown ears and an exceptional nose. When Cafe paused mid-stride with the rigid stillness of an animal that had detected something it could not categorize, Daniel paid attention. It was late afternoon on a Tuesday in early August when Cafe stopped at the edge of the old eastern pasture. The light was already thinning shadows, growing long across the savanna. Daniel was returning from a water pump check, tired, planning to go directly home. But Cafe was standing at the fence line with that particular stillness, and Daniel altered his route without thinking, following information before he had fully processed it. He smelled it before he saw it. A sharp, ferric odor, old blood infection, and the musk of a wild animal under extreme stress. He pushed aside a section of tall, dry grass and saw the creature caught in the wire. In the failing light, identification was difficult. The animal was pressed low against the base of the fence post, its long, rust-colored legs folded at wrong angles, its elongated face resting against the earth. A thick mane of black fur ran along its spine, raised not in aggression, but in the involuntary reflex of a body in shock. Its fur was dull and clumped. Its ribs were visible, where the old barbed wire had caught it at the right foreleg near the shoulder. The skin had been abraded, raw, matted with dried blood from days of struggling. Before the animal had finally stopped struggling, the creature's eyes were open, pale amber, large, tracking him as he crouched at the fence line. Not with fear exactly, but with the flat, exhausted attention of something that has moved beyond the capacity for fear into something quieter. Daniel did not know what he was looking at. It was not a dog, not a fox, though something about its face suggested that family. Its legs were extraordinary, impossibly long for its body, like a deer crossed with a wolf built for walking tall above the savanna grass. He did not need to identify it to understand, with the practical clarity of a man who had watched things die on his land, that this animal was very close to that edge. He went back to the farmhouse for a plastic bottle and filled it with water. When he returned, the animal had not moved. Cafe sat at a careful distance. Daniel approached slowly, crouching low, moving with deliberate patience. He did not touch the wire. Any amateur attempt risked driving the barbs deeper or snapping a leg that might already be compromised. Instead, he tilted the bottle and allowed water to fall in drops near the animal's mouth. The animal's tongue moved, barely, then more deliberately. Daniel stayed there for 50 minutes. His wife posted a photograph to a local wildlife group online. Within 20 minutes, a wildlife biologist had responded. Within 40, the image had reached the Regional Rescue Coordination Center in Brasilia. The identification came back with a category that changed everything. This was a Maenid wolf, Chrysocyon brachyurus, the largest canid in South America, listed as vulnerable under Brazilian law and protected under federal statute. It was not related to wolves or foxes in any direct lineage. It was the sole member of its genus, an evolutionary singular, so distinct from its nearest relatives that biologists sometimes describe it simply as itself irreducible and increasingly rare across the fragmented agricultural landscape of the Cerrado. It was also based on the photograph in critical condition. The rescue team was dispatched from the Regional Wildlife Center 2 hours away. Daniel did not leave the fence line. He refilled the bottle once walking back and forth across the darkening pasture cafe at his heel. When headlights finally appeared at the edge of the property, the maned wolf was still alive, its ribs still rising and falling, its amber eyes still tracking movement. Daniel stepped back to let the team approach. He did not know, standing there in the dark, that he would be invited 10 weeks from now to witness the final chapter of a recovery that had begun with a dog stopping at a fence line and a farmer who decided to follow his dog. Dr. Elena Carvalho had worked in wildlife rescue for 16 years. She was 41 small and composed with short dark hair and the particular calm of someone who understood what panic costs and had chosen systematically not to pay it. She assessed the fence line in under 2 minutes, severe dehydration, visible muscle wasting consistent with 3 to 4 weeks without adequate food, and a wound at the foreleg that would require evaluation under controlled conditions. The barbed wire had caught the animal in 2 places. Neither could be separated quickly. Her team worked for 35 minutes, sedation first, then tools that cut rather than pulled, releasing the wire incrementally, checking the limb at each stage for circulation and structural integrity. The foreleg was intact. The wound was deep infected at the margins, but the bone was sound. This was the first piece of good information. At intake, the team recorded a body weight of 23 kilograms, the low end of healthy adult male range, confirming significant muscle loss, but not beyond the threshold of recovery. Blood panels showed dehydration and elevated stress hormones. The wound was cleaned and treated under sedation. Then the animal was placed alone in an enclosure designed to minimize human visibility, and the team withdrew. This withdrawal was not negligence. It was the core of the protocol. The instinct in any rescue situation is to intervene to demonstrate care through visible presence. The clinical reality for a wild animal in critical condition is that unnecessary handling costs physiological resources the animal does not have. Every close human presence activates a stress response that redirects energy from healing. Feeding was done remotely through a sliding mechanism. Water was continuous. Wound checks happened on a fixed schedule, always under sedation. Infrared cameras recorded the enclosure around the clock. For the first 8 days, the maned wolf barely moved. He lay near the back wall, long legs folded beneath him, mane still raised in the reflex of a body that had not yet determined whether it was safe. He did not touch food for 4 days. Appetite suppression in severely stressed animals is metabolically driven, not a behavioral choice. On day 5, the camera showed him approaching the food station at 3 in the morning, consuming a small portion of fruit, then retreating to the back wall. The second piece of good information: in the 2nd week, the wound began to close. The infection had been caught before it reached the bone. By the 3rd week, the cameras recorded him bearing weight on the repaired leg during nocturnal movements. Tentative at first, then more deliberate. On one night in week 3, the infrared camera captured him rising from his resting position and holding himself upright for nearly 4 minutes, trembling along his spine before he lowered himself again. No one saw it happen. It was recorded in the log the following morning with a single notation: weight bearing observed approximately 2:17 a.m. The maned wolf's solitary nature proved an asset in recovery. Unlike pack canids, Chrysocyon brachyurus is designed for isolation. Adults navigate territories of up to 60 square kilometers alone, hunting alone, sleeping alone. The minimum contact protocol was not a clinical compromise. In biological terms, it was exactly what the animal needed. Silence and solitude were not limitations. They were home. By week 6, the cameras showed him pacing the full perimeter of the enclosure in a loose, exploratory circuit. Not the tight, repetitive movement of a stressed captive, but something more purposeful. His nose worked the air continuously. His long legs moved in the high-stepping gait, evolved for navigating tall grass, each foot lifting and placing with the precision of a creature built for a landscape that required constant reading of the ground. Week 8 brought the first running. The infrared camera captured him breaking into a short loping run along the fence line, not panicked, not directed toward anything. Just running the way an animal runs when its body has remembered what running is for. He covered the length of the enclosure 3 times, then stopped at the center ears, forward breath, visible in the cool night air. The morning log entry was slightly longer than usual. The formal assessment for release took 2 additional weeks. Every behavioral indicator was evaluated against the release criteria. A final physical examination under sedation confirmed complete wound healing body weight, recovered to 27 kilograms within healthy range, and normal organ function in blood panels. He passed every criterion on the checklist. A GPS collar was fitted, the lightest model available for the species, designed to detach automatically after 18 months, transmitting location at 6-hour intervals. Dr. Carvalho filed the release authorization on a Friday afternoon in early October. The release was scheduled for Tuesday at dawn. She made one additional call to a farmhouse 2 hours east of the release site. The release site was a federally protected reserve in the southern Cerrado, 8,000 hectares of managed savanna, one of the larger continuous fragments of maned wolf habitat remaining in that region. The Reserve Authority had identified an interior section away from boundary roads, with reliable water sources, documented prey populations, and confirmed absence of other GPS-collared wolves in immediate proximity. The species is solitary and territorial. Releasing an animal into another's established range would have added avoidable stress to an already critical transition. The transport vehicle left the rescue center at 4 in the morning. Daniel Souza had driven through the night. He stood at the edge of the designated release area as the sky turned from black to gray. His boots damp from the dew on the tall grass, his hands in his jacket pockets. He was not a man who required words for things. He was there. That was sufficient. The crate was positioned on level ground with its door facing east toward the interior of the reserve. The team withdrew to distance, allowing the animal a clear exit corridor without the pressure of nearby human presence. The door was opened remotely. For 4 minutes, nothing happened. This was not hesitation. The transition from the controlled environment of the rescue center to the open, with its wind carrying the information of hundreds of species, its vast smell of living earth, its absence of walls, is a sensory event of significant magnitude. The animal's nose was working at full capacity. The sounds of the open Cerrado at dawn were arriving in a volume and complexity that no enclosure could replicate. 4 minutes was processing. At the 4-minute mark, he appeared at the crate door. He stood in the frame of the opening. Long legs, braced mane slightly raised, amber eyes wide and working. He was 27 kilograms of recovered muscle over a skeletal frame evolved for exactly this landscape, and standing in the doorway with the Cerrado opening before him. He looked for the first time since anyone present had seen him like what he actually was. Not a patient, not a case number. An animal. Entire. Belonging to a world that did not require explanation. He stepped out of the crate. He did not run. He walked the long, high-stepping walk of the species, each leg lifting deliberately, his head swinging to read the wind. He crossed the clearing, moved toward the wall of tall grass at the far edge, and the grass folded around him as he entered it. He did not look back. Daniel Souza watched until the grass stopped moving. Then he stood in the early light for a moment longer, hands still in his pockets. Dr. Carvalho checked the GPS receiver. The collar had transmitted its first location fix at 6:14 a.m. In the weeks after release, the data from the collar told a story in coordinates. The maned wolf moved south and west from the release point in the first 48 hours, a wheat exploratory arc, covering nearly 12 kilometers, consistent with territorial survey, rather than directed travel. By the third day, GPS fixes began to cluster near a seasonal watercourse and a documented stand of labera plants along the reserve's interior boundary. He had found water fruit and cover. He had begun to establish. The 6-hour transmission intervals built a picture of his daily rhythm. He was most active at dawn and dusk, with a secondary peak in the late night. The typical crepuscular pattern of the species, a strong indicator that his natural behavioral rhythms had survived both captivity and rehabilitation intact. During midday hours, he rested in dense vegetation. By week 6 post-release, his territory covered 53 square kilometers within the typical adult male range for the species. He was hunting. Camera traps showed evidence of prey activity at the margins of his range. His body condition assessed through long-lens photography at known resting sites remained consistent with a well-fed adult managing his range without supplemental feeding. The labera plants in his core territory showed the signs of his visits, fruit taken from lower branches in quantities a single animal consumes over nightly passes. The maned wolf is among the plant's primary seed dispersers, depositing seeds in its scat at distances that allow labera to colonize far beyond its own reach. In eating, he was also planting. In surviving, he was maintaining ecological relationships that had been in place for longer than anyone has been keeping records. This is the kind of function that disappears quietly. When a species disappears, no single visible event, just slow unraveling. He was keeping them in place. 4 months after the release, a camera trap at a known crossing point captured an image that was by objective measure unremarkable. A maned wolf standing in a clearing under a full moon, his rust-colored coat silver-bleached by the light, his long shadow stretched across the pale grass behind him. His mane was relaxed. His ears were forward. He was not in motion, simply present in the way wild animals are present, with a completeness that has nothing to do with being observed. The image reached Dr. Carvalho, who pinned a small copy above her desk. It reached Daniel Souza, forwarded to his phone by the reserve's outreach coordinator, who had decided on her own initiative that the farmer deserved to see it. Daniel looked at the photograph for a long time. He was sitting at his kitchen table in the evening, and the farm was quiet around him. The photograph showed an animal that bore almost no visible relationship to the exhausted creature he had found at the fence line in August. The legs were the same, those impossible, elegant legs. But everything else was different. The body was full. The coat was bright. The posture was without apology. He set the phone down and finished his coffee. Outside, somewhere in the Cerrado, the animal was walking his territory in the dark, his nose working the night air, his long legs carrying him silently through the tall grass, each step a small act of continuation. 53 square kilometers of one animal's life, moving through a landscape that was in whatever way landscapes can belong to things his, exactly as the species was designed to be, and on a Tuesday evening in August, at the edge of a rusted fence, almost was not.